Hi everyone, it's Jason. I am J187 in the Stokastic Discord and on the major DFS sites. And baseball season is upon us. This is my favorite time of the DFS year. I love, love, love MLB DFS. And I am here to make a short video. This will be video number one, I think, of a two-part series on how to make an MLB model in Excel. And if you have seen any of my other videos that deal with the same for NBA and NFL, you will know that there are two major points that I want to drive across to you early on here. The first is that although you could take the model that we're building out here today and run with it basically for the whole season and get anything that you need to get done, it's not really my intention for you to do that. I really want you to take this and to use it to learn and to grow and to learn how to do Excel modeling on your own and to add to this and to make it something much more robust and much more custom suited to your needs. Although the MLB model that I use certainly started out as something somewhat similar to what you'll see here today, it has grown and grown and grown and is now, I don't know, 400 or 500 columns, of all kinds of data and things like that. So this, again, it's a jumping off point. It's a starter kit, if you will, and I do intend, or at least I do hope for you to take it and to grow with it. The second point that I want to make very clear is that anything that I display in any of these videos in terms of formulas, how to figure out things, sorting metrics, how to calculate randomness, they are all exemplars. They are all just meant for you to see it done. I'm not saying this is a superior way of doing it. This is the right calculation. This is what you should be doing. These are just examples. So, take from them what you will. When the time comes for you to build out your own model, maybe you want to calculate randomness in a different way or something like that. So I just want to drive those points home, and then I want to get started because I want to try to keep this video on the shorter side because there's going to be a second part of this, which is hopefully in the next few days I'll be able to record that video. It's going to be pulling stacks into your sorter for MLB because stacking is a huge part of MLB DFS. So what we have here is a blank workbook, and to get started, we're going to need 2 pages right off the bat. The first is going to be our MLB main, and the second is what I like to call copy player list. So the second page here is where we're going to put our data source, whatever you're going to be using to pull in the player names and things of that nature. In this case, I'm going to be using the Fantasy Cruncher player list, which is why I call this copy player list. In your case, you may be using something else entirely. This is going to be something that I'm going to change the color to yellow because I always associate my data source tabs with yellow. And while I do recommend choosing some sort of color scheme for these down here, whatever you choose is up to you. To me, I just always know that when I see a yellow tab, that's something that I copy into. The other thing, if you've ever seen my videos, you know that I like to do is when I do have a data source that I'm copying and pasting into, I always like to take my A1 cell, and I do this little trick here where I go to conditional formatting, highlight cell rules, more rules, no errors. So this is going to basically format this cell. Why did it go away? Oh, I didn't. Sorry about that. That's so no errors, and then format. That's what I meant to do. And what this is going to do is it's going to format the cell, providing there are no errors in it, and there should never be any errors in it. So the trick is it will keep your formatting forever. The formatting that I like to use here is a yellow background fill, and then I like an automatic pattern, and I like this loose dot pattern here, and I apply this. And that gives me this design in A1, and I always know that that's where I'm pasting my sheet so that it always lines up properly. Because there'll be times when, we scroll down here and you don't notice it and you paste here and all of a sudden you're starting at A91 or, you're scrolled over here, something like that. I just find that this is a good target to paste your sheet into. And you'll see that in action right now because I'm about to go over to Fantasy Cruncher on my screen that is off camera and grab a player list. Come over here and I just copy and paste it, Control V to paste into here, and that puts my player list in. And it lines it up exactly the same every time as long as I use my target cell. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pulling some of this data into this in a more formatted manner. So to do that, the first thing we need is the player list, the names. So I know that those are always going to start in this A column, and they're going to start at A3 as long as Fantasy Cruncher doesn't add any rows to this. It's okay if they add subsequent columns. This will always be A3 starting with the first name. So I come over to here, and in my A3, I'm going to say equals. And now what I want to do is I want to make, so let me show you to the first way. If I just say equals, and then we can click into this player list and click into this cell, copy player list A3. If I just say equals that, then we're going to get our first name there, Hunter Green. Perfect. Now, we need to copy this down, and we need to anticipate how many we're going to need, not just on whatever slate we're working on, but on the biggest slate of the year, right? Because we don't want to leave anybody out. So I'm going to say, I'm going to be honest, I don't even remember like how many players are present in big MLB slates, but let's just, for safety's sake, copy this down, copy, and we'll go down, I don't know, 750 spots. And then you copy it in. So what's going to happen is it's going to copy all the players, and it's going to get down to the last one here, which is Charles LeBlanc. And we're going to go to the end here, and we're going to see Charles LeBlanc. And after Charles, it's going to give you a bunch of zeros, right? It's going to give you hundreds of zeros here. To avoid doing this, what we do is we use this little trick here where I'm going to copy to my clipboard this copy player list A3. And I'm going to say equals. I'm going to change this formula a little bit to say if copy player list A3, if the cell in copy player list tab A3 is blank, then make this blank as well. Otherwise, if that is false, if it is not blank, then copy that cell into here. Okay? So I'm going to replace that formula and send it down. You can send it all the way down by highlighting the top and then getting this little black cross at the bottom right, double click, and that'll send your formulas all the way down. And this time when you scroll down, you'll notice that as it ends, everything's blank. That's just a cleaner look and helps to avoid errors in the future. Now, what is a good header for this column? Players. It's our players, okay? So we'll call this players. The next thing that we'll do is we need to bring over some of this data here because we might be using it. Now, what I like to do is I like to bring it all because there's really no penalty for having it all in this sheet. But I am going to tell you ahead of time that we're going to be using these first few columns for some stuff that is not, that data. So let's go ahead and set those up first. So the next one over here, we've got player, and then I like to have a projection column. And then actually we could just say proj. And then I like to have an exposures. And then I like to have randomness. Okay. So we got player, projection, exposure, and randomness. And I put them in this order because if you notice, when you ever look at Fantasy Cruncher, if you go to the upload data tab, it gives you the option to upload in this order. So when we're done with all of this stuff, if we ever wanted to put this into Fantasy Cruncher, we could just grab this whole group here and it will go in an orderly fashion, and I'll show that to you at the end. So we've got these columns. Now, I don't know if I've ever done this before in any of my other videos, but I'm going to do it here. So let's skip a column as a spacer, and I am going to use a settings section here, okay? Now, the other thing is, in terms of formatting, I like to format player names by simply leaving them left justified and then using this indent increaser right here just to make a nice clean look. Everything else that I'm going to do, I like to center. So we might as well just go ahead and preemptively do that. So now I've got my settings section here. And in this settings section, depending on the sport, you can, and basically this is kind of like a faux settings section, right? Excel in and of itself is not going to do anything with this unless we use formulas to tell it to. But we can start putting in some settings here that we anticipate wanting to use. And I can tell you from experience, the first one would be the number of standard deviations. But in this case, I'm going to do this for P. Now, this is going to be the number of standard deviations for pitchers. In baseball, I'm going to use slightly different randomness for pitchers than I do batters, okay? Pitchers are much more consistent in MLB like NBA players are, whereas batters are extremely volatile, much more variance there. So it makes much more sense to use higher amounts of randomness for batters than for pitchers. So, and then I'm going to give you a spot here to determine the number of standard deviations. Let's put a filler in here, a placeholder, if you will, just so we can keep everything formatted. Let's start out with 0.5. Okay, 0.5 standard deviations. And then the next one down, we are going to do number of standard deviations, but we are not going to do it for pitchers. We are going to do it for batters or for hitters, okay? And let's just say 1.5 for the hell of it for right now. What else might we want to do? Well, let's put a max randomness in, because what if randomness gets out of control? I can tell you that I use pro randomness, which is the normalized version of randomness. If you don't know what that is in Fantasy Cruncher, then go ahead and look that up. It takes the randomness spread and then it centers it much closer to the median to eliminate the outliers. So for max randomness, to tame it in, let's just say 125. And again, these are not 150. These are not the numbers that I'm suggesting you use. I can't stress that enough. These are just examples to get something on the paper here so we can see. Okay, so max randomness 150, and we don't need to worry about like a pitcher max randomness and a batter, because only batters are going to grow to be anything kind of ridiculous. But if you did want to cap pitchers at, say, 25 max randomness or 40 max randomness, you certainly could add that as well. I'm not going to, but I am going to put in some default randomnesses. Pitcher default random, which we'll call it 25, and batter default randomness, which I don't know, 125, whatever, okay? So now we've got some settings. Now I'm gonna use another spacer here. And right here, we're gonna begin putting in our data from this place, okay? So now the first thing we wanna do is we wanna take all of our headings, okay? Because these headings put in here are going to be what my next formula actually reads to find them on this page. So one easy way of pulling in this data would be, let's say we wanted to pull position. We could use, a lot of you might be familiar with VLOOKUP. I hate VLOOKUP because, first of all, you end up having to count the number of columns, like look at it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and it gets really, really annoying, especially if you have a lot of columns. The other big weakness of VLOOKUP is that it doesn't look backwards. If you want to look something up, it has to be in front of you. So I could never look up injury by team. You have to go all the way over to here. So I use index match when I do lookup stuff. I will show you index match and kind of walk you through how to do it. And you could index match this by pulling in this column, D. We would say, look in D for position. Position, look in D. But the problem with that is, let's say a week from now, Fantasy Cruncher adds a column in here for something else. Likes, dislikes, right? And now position is in E. So every time your model pulls in position, it's going to be pulling in dislikes, the new column that took over D, not position like you want it to. So to avoid that, I use a pretty complicated formula that I'm going to type in here and walk you through, okay? So I'm not going to walk you through this formula all the way, but I will just give you the basics of it. So now here's what it is. First of all, it's if A3 equals blank, then blank. This is a variation on that if copy player list A3 is blank, then blank. Only now we don't have to keep looking back here because we know already that if we run out of players, this is going to be blank. So from here on, everything on our model can just look back to this A column and say, if there's no player here, let's make this all blank because we don't want to have a bunch of zeros and stuff like that. So if A3 equals blank, then blank. If it's not blank and there's a player here, if error at indirect, copy player list, okay? So indirect is an advanced Excel formula that I'm not going to get into much here. It's very useful. I use it a lot. If you want to look it up and try to familiarize yourself with it, I do recommend you do that. But what it does is it allows you to reference a cell indirectly by some other means. And in this case, we're looking in the copy player list tab. Then we are substituting the address of where we match, and instead of DY2, this is going to be H2 because we're matching this heading. So where we match H2 in that player list in column 2. Okay? So, I'm sorry, in row 2. In row 2. So we're going to match this on the player list in row 2. When we find it, we're going to substitute the address of it indirectly for this formula. What that's going to do, and then, the rest of this formula is just kind of like, old text, new text is blank, row number, the row is the other blank indirect reference that we need so that it lines up to the row. Again, you don't need to understand this formula. This is probably the most complicated formula you'll ever use in your time using Excel, unless you do some sort of work with Excel. But nonetheless, what you need to know is that it works. It will pull in, it will come in here, it'll search row 2 for injury, find it, and then it will match the row to where we are here, which we know will match Hunter Green, and it will pull this in. So let's say hello. We'll put hello in here, and then we'll go back here, and look, it's hello. Okay, so now I know that it is pulling in the injury status for Hunter Green. Okay, so, and the beauty of this is once you set it up exactly as you see here, pay very close attention to these dollar signs. And if you don't know what those are, the dollar signs lock in absolute references. Okay, Excel by nature is a dynamic reference language. So if I say in this cell equals where are we? 5. That's Vladimir Guerrero. If I say equals A5 and say enter, that's going to be Vladimir Guerrero, right? Now, if I copy this formula from here to here, it's not going to be Vladimir Guerrero. It's going to automatically adjust this A5 reference to B5 because I'm moving one column over. So if I copy and paste this here, I get hello, not Vladimir Guerrero. That is the dynamic nature of Excel. However, when you do a dollar sign before A, it says always reference A if you copy it over. So in this case, if I were to say equals $sign A5, now it doesn't matter how many times I copy this, it's just going to be Vladimir Guerrero. It always references the A. It locks in the A. And then similarly, if I say equals A5, and then I copy this down, it's going to adjust it to A6. But if I put the $sign before the 5 and I absolute reference the 5, it's going to keep doing Guerrero because it's going to stay on 5. Okay, so that's the lock mechanism. So pay attention that we're locking in A3 because if projection is blank or whatever, we don't want to avoid putting this in. We really only want to do that if there's no player here. And we want to lock in the 2, not the H, but the 2 for matching. Because when I do copy this over, I do want to reference I. I want that H to adjust to I because now we're on likes. But I don't want, as I go down to Logan Webb, Vladimir Guerrero, I don't want to start looking up the result for Hunter Green. I want to look up the headings. Okay. And then here we lock in 2 and 2 because we always want to look in row 2 on this. So just pay attention to what's locked in that formula. And once you get that formula in here, you can take it, copy it, Control C, go all the way across to the end, Control V, and that will populate everything for this row. Then you can go ahead and highlight it all and come down here and use our little black cross double clicky trick, which doesn't work because I have done something I shouldn't have done. What the hell did I do wrong? Let's go back and try that again. Oh, you know why it's not working? So in order for that trick to work, the very adjacent row has to have like the stuff in it that goes down as far as you want to go. This won't populate all the way down the player list because this doesn't populate down the player list. This row is blank. I'm sorry, this column is blank. So what you have to do is you just have to take it and you have to manually bring it down. And pay attention to the fact that you're not trying to bring this down to just where the players end. You want to bring it down to where you decided to end everything. So if it was 750, bring it down to 750. Because if you just stop it at the end of this player list, tomorrow's player list, next week's player list might be longer, and you're obviously leaving players out. But anyway, from here on in, anything else that you add here, you can just double click as long as I did not mean to do that. As long as you do this trick, as long as the row immediately prior to it, or immediately column immediately prior to it, or the column immediately in front of it is populated all the way down, you can do that trick. Okay, but nonetheless, as you notice here, we've got our stuff set up really well. We pulled in all of our data, and we're ready to start populating some of this. Okay, now the reason I put projection here, even though projection is also in AF or AE, depending on how you look at it, I like the AF because it's the adjusted one, is you want it readily available for when you go ahead to put this back into Fantasy Cruncher. And also, let's say you were the kind of person that wanted to change your projections in some way. It's good to have the original sitting here and to bring your adjusted one into here. Okay. So let's start out by doing our trick. Equals A3 equals blank. Actually, sorry, this needs to be if A3 equals blank, then make this blank. If not, then just bring in AF3, which is the projection. Okay? Just copy it right over. Now again, if you wanted to make some sort of a change, you could say, like, let's say I think that everybody should be increased by 10% today. You could do that here, right? Bring in AF3 times 1.1. Up everybody by 10, right? So you can make any kind of changes you want to. You could make very convoluted changes. If this player is a first baseman on the Yankees, add 5%. You could do whatever you want to this, okay? So now, exposures. Now, here again, this is ultimately going to be an exposure cap in Fantasy Cruncher. Or if you're using a different optimizer or whatever you're doing it for, you can have exposure cap here. And if you're using some sort of another optimizer where there is data that you can copy and paste into it, import into it, then obviously you would change these to match yours. You wouldn't do this one because it matches up to Fantasy Cruncher if you're using a different optimizer where it doesn't match. Again, this is just examples to show you. And exposure, you could just, well, not 10%, 100%. You could just keep everybody at 100% if you don't use exposure caps. Or you could create some sort of a formula. Let's say that you are one of those people that likes to take ownership. And you know what? I think ownership might not be populated here because why? Because it's too early, right? Because I have this open for the actual slate on Thursday, and we don't have ownership populated there yet. So if this were a normal slate, you would have ownership somewhere in here. Who knows where? Let's put it here. Okay. Let's do ownership. Oh, wait, you know what? Let's not do that. You know why? Because that's going to screw up my... if you start adding things in here arbitrarily, it's going to screw up the headings that I copied over. So in this case, I'll put it last because it doesn't matter where it goes. I just don't want to screw anything up. And just note that if you build this model before FC is fully populated for the first time this year, if you don't wait till Thursday, whatever, then you may want to go ahead and afterwards recopy in all the headings and just kind of reformat everything where it goes if you want. But for right now, let's just say, let's just put a number randomly between 10 and 80 here, okay, so that we've got some ownership. Okay, so I'm just giving myself some ownerships. And let's just add ownership here. Oh my God, what did I do? I just went over to the millionth column. That's fun. Oh, Jesus. Now I've unlocked Pandora's box here where my model thinks I have 8 billion rows. Try not to do that. That's kind of annoying. But we can copy and paste this over here and it populates our ownerships. Also bear in mind that this might be 0.11 in Fantasy Cruncher. They kind of seem to oscillate between those two formats. I don't know how it's going to be this year, but if it's 0.11, obviously you'll have to deal with the decimal point by either multiplying or dividing by 100, however you want to do it. But let's just say you're the kind of person that instead of setting exposure caps to 100%, that you want to use some sort of formula like, and by the way, if you're not just using we should have still done if A3 equals blank, then blank, otherwise 100. And if you're the kind of person that instead of doing 100, you want to do some sort of a formula, let's say it's based off of, let's say you want to do everybody at 30%. Let's say you want to do some sort of formula based on ownership. You can say AK3 times 1.2. So ownership times 20% is your exposure cap. Although in this case, we're going to want to do AK3 divided by 100 because I didn't use a decimal point. And then you can add 20% to it. Right? See? You could do that. However you want to do this, it's up to you. Just showing you examples. And then we come to randomness. Now, randomness. This is going to be a pretty complicated formula because it's going to involve our settings. And we're going to start it out slow. We're going to do it very basic. One thing I like to do when I teach Excel modeling for DFS is I like to do incremental formulas. I never like to sit there and be like, all right, we're going to do equals, blah, 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 and concoct this really long, bizarre formula that you can't see how it grew to that point. The only exception being this thing that I use because I don't want you to really understand the inner workings of this. It's too complicated. But for this, we're going to start slow and build it up. Equals, if A3 equals blank, then blank. 25%. Everybody gets 25% randomness. Okay? That would be the most basic level of this. But we know we're not going to do that. So what are we going to do? Well, we've got all these settings here we need to work with, but let's get a base first. And a base that I like to work with is standard deviation, which is 0 for everybody, which is fun. Standard deviation divided by projection, which is technically the coefficient of variation, which is a measure of how spread things are. And if you ever sit down and really think about that, it actually is technically what randomness is in DFS. If we had actual standard deviations, which we don't for everybody, then what you'll find is that their projection, because projection in DFS is basically a median, and standard deviation is standard deviation, their standard deviation divided by the median is going to show you by what percentage a typical performance might vary lower or higher than the median, which is really what we're doing when we do randomness. So this formula works exceedingly well for randomness, but what we do need is some standard deviations. So, at this point, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift over. Give me 1 second here. I might grab a rewind sheet from Fantasy Cruncher instead of this week's one that has everything populated nicely, like standard deviation and ownership and all that fun stuff. So let's go ahead and grab, let's go back to last year. And oops, of course I click on the 2-game slate, which isn't the best thing to do. All right, let's click on a big slate so we get some data. I'm just going to grab a random slate from last year that I knew had 15 games in it. And I'm going to replace my player list. Hopefully that keeps everything pretty much on target. Yep. And now we can take out this 100 because FC was using the decimal point system for ownership. Here we go. So now we do have some standard deviations for these. We don't. We don't have standard deviations. Why? Why in the world don't we have standard deviations? That is strange. Here I am thinking I'm all slick, firing up an old slate. And what do we not have? Standard deviation. Why? Why don't we have it? What am I missing? You know what? I can't think of why they're not there. So I'm going to grab the player list that I happen to have open in my model right in front of me that sure as hell does have them. Here they are. Okay. And so we do have standard deviations now. Ay. Strange, strange, strange. Okay. So we have standard deviations here now. Okay. Now, another little proviso here is these standard deviations are derived from Fantasy Cruncher. Standard deviations vary in the way that they're calculated. The math behind them is always the same. The sample sizes can be very different. So use a trusted source for this. If you use Stokastic's standard deviations, I would recommend you find a way to put those into here instead. Obviously, you're not going to copy and paste them over this every time. So what I would do is I would just add another sheet like this for Stokastic projections or the top stacks. I don't even know what shows standard deviation for MLB and Stokastic. I know that Boom Bust tool for NBA shows it. So you could add, a page here to copy in the projection sheet from Stokastic. And instead of pulling standard deviation with this formula, cancel this out and use the index match. And we'll get to index match in a little while. Use index match to pull it from a different sheet. Okay. Do not use this substitute match for any other sheets than the one that you pulled these names from, because it is always going to pull Dalton Varsho or whoever is first in this row. And if you use this formula for standard deviation, but you change his copy player list to like Stokastic projection sheet, it's not going to match Dalton Varsho. It's going to match whoever is listed first on that sheet. So just take note of that. If you change your source, you are going to have to use index match. Okay. But to make my point originally, let's just stick with these standard deviations for now. And to do randomness, instead of this 25%, let's go ahead and say AC3, which is standard deviation, divided by projection. Now, at this point, you can decide if you want to use projection here, if you change it, or if you use the basic projection that is assigned from Stokastic if you subscribe through Fantasy Cruncher. If you subscribe to Fantasy Cruncher through Stokastic. But let's just go with that original one, and we've got 106% randomness. That is basically what you would consider, Dalton Varsho's natural randomness. That is saying that if his median performance is 9.73 fantasy points and the standard deviation of those is this, then there is roughly 106% variance around that median for what he produces. So copy that all the way down. And as you can see, where it starts to get a little bit problematic is when we get into the pitchers, we've got some pretty high randomness. 76 is pretty high for a pitcher. 89 is very high for a pitcher. Is this the greatest approach? Maybe not. And the other thing you have to remember is this is one standard deviation of variance. In other words, this is saying that if his projection is 9.73, then it is 106% of this in each direction to incorporate one standard deviation of 10.33. Now, if you're not familiar with the empirical rule, 67% or roughly thereabouts of the time, a player's performance could be expected to fall within that one standard deviation. So plus or minus the standard deviation of the median. But 67% means that, 32 point something percent of the time, it's going to be more or less than that. So you could even decide you want to go with more standard deviations worth of randomness. If I can tell you that if you use 2 standard deviations, you're going to be, considering almost all of the possibilities, like 95% of those possibilities. That's why we've set up the settings section here to determine how many standard deviations we want to use. So what we're going to have to do, though, is determine which one of these applies, because we need to know if this player is a batter or a pitcher. Luckily for us, that information can be found in this position column. Now, what you'll notice with the convention that FC does is that a pitcher is labeled as P, and all batters have something else. We can use that to our advantage. We don't have to, write a bunch of different formulas. If they're outfield center, if they're shortstop, we can just say if they're pitcher or not. So, and we want to make sure that we grab the right standard deviation from our settings, depending on what they are. So let's go back into this formula now and start modifying it again. So we know that AF is our projection, and that should basically stay the same. We're not changing that, but our AC is where we're going to multiply. So let's start out by putting some parentheses around this and saying times something, right? So we're using a multiplier. If I did it like this, it's 1.5 standard deviations, okay? But we want to do it to this because we want to be able to change it dynamically. If I change my mind tomorrow and I want to do 1.25, or more importantly, if I want to say on short slates, let's use 1, and on big slates, let's use 2, we have that power to do so. So we want to say times this. And now the thing to remember is, this is for batters, right? Because he's a batter. Thing to remember is, we don't want this reference to move with us. In other words, if we go down, we don't want to start referencing this and down one more. So we need to lock this in. So we want to use the F4 key when we're in front of this, and that will add our dollar signs in. And that will lock in that exact cell for every row going down. Okay? So now what we've got is we have standard deviation times our setting divided by our projection for everybody. And if we change this, it changes our randomness. Okay? Now that's good. But what if our player is not a batter? Well, in this case, we're going to take this whole thing, copy it to the clipboard, and we're going to say the only time we want to use this is if J3, our position, is not pitcher. This means is not equal to pitcher. Then do this. We have to add a parenthesis because we've added a parenthesis. So to close the parentheses, one thing you can always do if you want to do parentheses is you can just keep adding them until one turns black. The black one signifies that it closes the first one. So now we have done this only for our batters. So what we can do is we can come down here and look at our pitchers. And now it says false because we don't have any conditions for them. Okay? So now what we want to do is we can add to our formula here to say otherwise and we're going to take this we're going to copy this part of the formula to our clipboard because it's still the formula that decides randomness. We're just going to change the reference. Instead of F6, we want to look in F4. Okay? So now what this says is if it's true that it's not a pitcher, do this. If it's false that it is a pitcher, do this one instead. So let's see what that does. And actually, what I really should have done, just to not confuse anybody, is we should do this always at the top. So I'm going to paste this in and make sure that, actually, I shouldn't paste that in. You know what? Let me do it over. Okay. Just ignore what I did a minute ago and do it here. I don't want to get confused, okay? So F4, because this all has to be AC3, AF3. So again, now we're saying if it's not a pitcher, use the batter. If it is a pitcher, use the pitcher's standard deviation. So let's see what happens down here when we get to pitcher. And now you'll see that pitchers not only have they populated now instead of the error message, but they're all in a tame zone, right? They are not in that 1.5 standard deviations. They're a half standard deviation, something much more reasonable. But we also have these defaults. So what are the defaults for? Well, let's say that for some reason today, Dalton Varsho this is formatted funny. Don't worry about that. That's not our fault. Okay. And again, don't worry about this. Excel will fix the formatting. You don't have to do this. But what if Varsho had no standard deviation? What then? Well, now he's got 0 randomness. So in the event of an error like that, something going wrong, it would be nice to have a fallback to the default randomness. So what we can do here is under our, if it's not a pitcher, do this. Then we can add if error. And basically what this does is it says if any error occurs on this calculation, then do this instead, okay? To do this, we have to close this parenthesis and then add a comma. This will allow us to put our if error statement in here. And you can follow along right down here. If error, let's go ahead and equal this, F12. And again, don't forget to lock this in. Now we can also add our if error here, which, where does this go? Where's my if error go here? So now, you know what I have to do? We have to add a parenthesis here so that we go back to the false, right? This gets very complicated. So we're at value of error. No, it goes right into if false, right? Huh. I'm trying to think of what I did wrong here. See, I got wrapped around my own axle here. So this is if error, then do this. If this is true, and if there's an error, do this. And then I feel like this should be the weird. I got myself confused here. Give me a sec. Oh, you know what? That's why. Sorry. Let's go ahead and go back to this. This should say, if it's a pitcher, then we put the F error here. That's what I should have done. That's what I should have done. And then the if error should go here. So that's value if error. Right? Yeah. Is that correct? Yes. Sorry. So it should be if it's not a pitcher, then the formula should be if error this. And then if it is a pitcher, which is the false part of this statement, then we want to add another if error here. And if that is an error, we want to do the pitcher default randomness and F4 lock it in. And I think that's what I meant to do. So let's test this all out. So let's test out some errors, okay? Now, if this worked, then taking away Varshow's standard deviation should leave this with a 125 instead of a 0, and it didn't work. It did not work. Oh, yeah. You know what? I think that's because, first of all, we do need to, so sorry for this. Since these are standard deviations and this is percentage of randomness, we do need to go back and add percentages in here. But this is still not working for some reason. It should be if error. So I wonder if it's because this isn't an error per se. This is an error. Yeah. So that's the thing. Him not having a standard deviation is not an error. Him having a standard deviation of F is an error. And then so clearly the if error is working. So that's working. And then I guess we'll just make sure that if we give a pitcher a standard deviation of F, so we'll come down to Merrill Kelly at 253. Where's standard deviation? 253. I'll give that a G, and then we'll check Merrill Kelly down here at 253. And so that's working. Okay, so it is working for errors. It's working for errors. It's just not working for zeros. And I don't even remember what his standard deviation was, so I'm just gonna give him this. All right. So it's working. So it doesn't find an error when there's a 0 standard deviation. So the two ways you can handle that, you could go ahead and add into here. Not to make this even more complicated, but you can also say if error, you've got all of this stuff, right? You could then say in here, if standard deviation, I'm going to leave this as an option because I know this is going to get really confusing for some people, but what we could do is we can say, if it's not a pitcher, and then if error, we can say if AC3 equals blank, then what? Why did that happen? Then F12. Otherwise, do this. And then if the AC3 equals blank, then F10. Otherwise, I think that'll work. You either come in here and close 2 more parentheses. No, that doesn't work. Why doesn't that work? Oh, you know why? Because instead of putting the parentheses out there, I need to add 1 here, right? Nope, still screwed it up. If AC3 equals blank, then false. So this is if error. Oh, oh. It's gonna go here. It's gonna go there and there. That's what it is. All right. Jeez Louise. So now this, I'll just do it in here. Just be careful. Don't ever like copy over these formulas. I'm only gonna do it because I'm gonna undo it. I don't feel like going back to the other sheet. But no, that still doesn't do it. I wonder why that didn't work. Because it does say if AC3. Oh, not if it's blank. If it's 0, I put a 0 there instead of a blank. My bad. That should work, and it does. Okay, so you can do that. I don't think I recommend. Well, I mean, get a good look at the formula. It's not a fun one, but anyway, if you want to do it, whichever way you want to do it, you can do it that way. You've seen the formula both ways. Copy this down. And now it's basically foolproof. Okay. So now the last thing that I like to do on this sheet is I like to start, I'm going to call this randomness settings. I like to start formatting a little bit. Okay. So I will take this and, make it, let's pick a color here. I like that. We'll make it that. And then if I'm going to do that, I'm going to make this white. Okay. And then I'll probably, oh, that's too far. I'll probably send this down, to whatever, 750 and make that like that too, just so it starts to look pretty nice. And then one convention that I use all the time is any area on my model where I'm allowed to type, where I know that it's expected that I put input in and I'm not going to be copying over any formulas, I make this very light pale yellow color. That tells me, hey, I'm supposed to type there. And then I would make these headings match the rest like this. And then finally, I think I would probably do something where I did, how would I do this? Let me see. I'd make it, you know what I'd do? I'll make this white or no fill. And I would do, like a thick side border on that. And then, sorry, I'm very big into formatting. I just think that it makes everything easier to read, looks nicer. And I think if you have some pride in what you do, I don't know why that took that away though. It's kind of annoying. I think it makes it so that you're more apt to use it, build it, grow it. Oh, I guess for these, I don't think I ever realized that. I've got to like put all the ones in that it's supposed to have. There we go. That makes sense. But so see, you get a little section there. That's fun. And then for this, I really like to use this light gray up here. And then we're going to do one more thing. I have to use that. And then up here, whoa, goodness, we don't want to do that. We don't want to go crazy. We just want to go to here. I like to use a darker gray up here, like this. Now, up here, we're going to use another interesting formula, okay? So for this, we're going to use a formula just like this, but where we do H2. But you'll notice that this has a difference in it, and I'll show you the difference. See how this says, actually, let me I'll grab this formula here, and I'll put it on the screen for you to see. And then I'll go into this formula here. You can see the big difference here is that it's pretty much the same formula, with the exception that it's got row plus one here. Okay. Now, what that's going to do is that's going to take this, and it's going to basically it's going to basically tell you what heading you're actually copying in here. So I'll take this. And so what you end up with is, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to do this. I like to do it like this. So what you end up with here, and for some reason we lost our centering for some of this stuff. Center, nice. What you end up here is, this tells you the expected heading. This tells you the data copied, and this tells you the data that matches what's copied. So if this doesn't match this, you know you've got a problem. And I like to do that just as a validation. So if I'm ever looking through my model and I see that this says ownership and this is my projection, I know that my formula here is screwed up. Like, for instance, I did something like AG2 here, right? So I just do that little validation, quick and simple. And this is the main page of the model. So we'll go into the next tab here, which is going to be sorter. I want to try to build it to sorter a little bit in this video as well, so that when we do the stacks, we don't have to do any of this stuff. We can just kind of jump right into it. So for the sorter, I do run this numbering system down here, and I think this is basically a carryover from my earlier days where this actually meant something, and I don't even think it means anything anymore to me, but I do it anyway. And a lot of this is because I copy a lot of formulas from one model to the next, and if I don't keep everything aligned the same, it gets screwed up. So I'm going to do it here. And I'm going to drag it down until I have exactly 2000. Now, I'm doing 2000 because I am anticipating, also I started this in the wrong place, so I'm going to add a row. My bad. Should have started this in A3. And I do 2000 because 2000 lineups is what my sorter handles. I never use more than that. If you do 3000, then you're going to want to do that 3000. Now, up here, we're just going to type in DK for Draftkings. And the reason I do that is because on my model, I have it so that it dynamically shifts when I type in DK or Fanduel. It shifts to automatically become a sorter for Draftkings or Fanduel. And then I'm going to start with my positions, okay? Now, if you want to do the, I don't think I'm going to show you how, well, you know what? I will. Let me show you. It's worth it. Depending on whether or not this is DraftKings or FanDuel, you're going to have a different heading here, right? Some of them are going to be the same, some of them aren't. So if this one is DK, if A1 is DK, notice it's locked in. If we're doing DraftKings, then this is going to be pitcher. Okay? If I'm going to center a bunch of stuff. All right. If it's FanDuel, it's going to be pitcher as well. And it doesn't say if it's FanDuel, it's just because if it's anything else here, right? Because if it's not DraftKings, it's FanDuel. My model only does those two. Save myself a little typing. But so the first one is going to be pitcher. Okay? I'm going to copy in all of these, and then we'll walk through them. Okay? So the next one says, if it's DraftKings, it's pitcher. But if it's FanDuel, it's C1B. right? And now, if we change to Fanduel, you see that it's catcher first base, and see how they change dynamically? Okay, so I'll walk you through each one of these, but so if it's DK, it's pitcher. If it's Fanduel, it's catcher first base. If it's DK, it's catcher. If it's Fanduel, it's second base. If it's DK, it's first base. If it's Fanduel, it's third. Shortstop, outfield, and then these are outfield, utility, and blank. And obviously, for the ones that are the same, I don't need to put this formula. I could just write outfield, but I like to keep everything the same so I don't ever get confused. The other thing is there's some conditional formatting in these that say if A1 equals Fanduel, then it's blue. Okay. And that is the rule for all of these. And then I just make the base color for them the Draftkings color, orange for me, so that if I do change this, not only does that change, but it changes to blue to let me know, hey, we're on Fanduel. Okay. And I have no idea why this has a separate border. It should not. Bubble. Done. So there we go. We're at K. L is going to be all the way down to number 2000. We are going to make this a separator bar. And we go down to 202 because the lineups start on 3. So I'm going to make this a separator bar. Okay, just so I can keep my stuff clear. And now, I should also tell you that I use that same rule for these. And again, just color this in, put crunch, whatever you want, but you use that same conditional formatting rule so that this all changes, okay? And then the same is true here, okay? Same rule, so everything turns blue so you can see, okay? So now we've got that part all done. The next thing we're gonna do is we're going to have to bring over all of these formulas. Now remember, we want all the headings to change all the time. So don't forget to bring them in, okay? Bring those in. And so from here on, to be honest with you, I stop. Actually, I don't. I do still have. So up here, what I do is I copy all of these, and then I use merge and center, and then I type in strip names, and I copy that conditional formatting rule in here, and I do keep copying it so that everything constantly walks back and forth. So now this is where the crunch we paste in here is we're going to start stripping off those IDs. So what do you think we're going to use here? We're going to go back and use my highlight rules, more rules, no errors, format, yellow, automatic, loose dots. So I know I'm pasting in here, okay? So now we can go ahead and, as soon as I figure out what I'm doing in life, we can make a quick crunch. So right now I'm just going to run a quick crunch, just a few lineups, so that I can pull something in here. And then you would export this just as you ordinarily would. Go right underneath your header on your export sheet. Control Shift right and down, copies everything. Come in here and paste. And you'll see it doesn't actually exceed over here. It's just because these are tight, it spills over, but that's not actually in this M column. Okay, don't worry about that. When we start putting formulas in here, that'll go away. But so now what you'll notice we have this Joe Musgrove and his ID, right? And all that stuff in here. And we need to strip that. So now we're going to put a formula in here to strip that. But the formula has to be a little complicated, right? Because it's not going to look the same on Fanduel as it's going to be on Draftkings because they use different formats. The ID is in the front in Fanduel. So our format starts out, if B4 equals blank, then blank. We're going to use that trick again. If there's no lineup here, we don't want to keep doing this. If A1 is Fanduel, in this case I did Fanduel first, whatever. If it's Fanduel, then this is your formula. It's the right of B4, and then it's going to say the number of characters. So basically what we're saying is take what's to the right of this. And you know what? Just to show you this, I'm going to take a Fanduel name and paste it into this crunch. This is what a Fanduel name looks like. It's got the ID and then a colon and then the player name, okay? So what we're saying is take the right. In other words, start at the right of this, where Shohei Ohtani is. And how many do we want to take? Well, we could count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but it's going to be different for every player, right? Because Shohei Ohtani's name is different than Joe Musgrove's. So to come up with the exact right length all the time, we're going to take the length of this, the whole thing, all the characters, minus, and then we're going to use this find formula to find the colon, minus where we find the colon, right? And in this find formula, it's going to ask us, find what? Find the colon. Where do you want to look? B4. Where do you want to start? Character 1. Okay? So if we take the length minus wherever we find this, what it's going to do is it's going to take this whole length, it's going to count it up. Let's say it's, I don't know, 40. And then it's going to count where the colon is from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's say that's 20. Then it's going to take the 40 minus the 20 and it's going to return the 20 characters to the right. Now, I'm making up numbers here because I don't feel like counting this, but wherever this colon is, however long Ohtani's name is or Musgrove's name is or whatever name is here, that's going to be a different length and a different location for this, but it's always going to end up with just this. It's always going to cut out whatever is at the colon and before, okay? Now, that's how it works for Fanduel. Now, let's go out and let's copy Musgrove back, and I copied over my formula. I'll have to put that fancy thing back in there. It's fancy to me. So if it's Draftkings, now we want to take the left because the left is where the name is. The left of B4, and in this case, we just want to find where the first parenthesis is. Where do we want to look? In B4. Where do we want to start? Character 1. But we also want to take away 2 from this. The number of characters is going to be wherever this is located, minus 2. Why? Because there is a space and there is also the parenthesis. We don't want either one. We want to move back 1, 2 and get just up to here. Okay? So when we do that, we get Joe Musgrove. See? Now, what we cannot do is copy this all the way down because even though this has a color in it, it's still blank. Okay? So what we have to do is copy this and run it down the 2,000 times. Okay? And then from here on in, we can absolutely just copy everything down because we have our, reference here. So this is set up so that whatever needs to stay locked, A1 is locked, B4. I locked B4 because it's the first name, and obviously there'll be a first name if there's a lineup here and not if there isn't. So we don't need to have this dynamically go to the next one. You could, it doesn't matter. But everything that's locked, that needs to be locked is locked. Everything that needs to be dynamic is dynamic. We could just copy this all the way across. And then we could highlight it all, and we could do this. Another trick, I don't know if you know this, but if you highlight all these columns and then you set this to a width, it will auto adjust all the columns to that width. So, and whereas I like to keep this scrunched up because I don't really care what's in here, I do like to be able to read these names. So I open this up, spread it out a little bit. Now you'll notice one thing. If we change this to Fanduel, it's going to give us some errors because there are no, this is not a Fanduel formatted name. If I copied in Shohei, it's not pulling it. Why? Wonder why that's not finding it. Oh, you know what I did? Whoops. Don't make this mistake. I don't know how I did that, but this is all B4 for some reason, and it should be B3. Whoops. Make sure you fix this. I don't know how I did that. Somewhere along the line, we got a little mixed up. Everybody's human. All right, and then just make sure that you fix that everywhere. And you'll notice that this is blank because the positionality ends here for Fanduel, right? So there is no, and this would be blank too because if these were Fanduel lineups, there would be nothing here. There'd be nothing in this last column. But you see, it's Shohei Ohtani, right? So it works. And now we'll change it back to Draftkings. And then the last thing we want to make sure we do is, I don't remember, oh, I did send this down, didn't I? Just to make sure that everything is now perfect. All right, good. So now you can see that that works, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to bring in some more data. I think I'm going to make the decision at this point not to show you the next step until after we do the stacks in the next video. In the next video, I'm going to come back and undo what I'm about to do now, probably. But for this video, in case you don't go to the next video, let's do this. What am I doing? So we're going to add another formula in here, okay? And that formula is going to say if M3, now from here on, I'm going to work off of M3 because if there's nothing here, there's no lineup, right? And I will let this dynamically change because it doesn't matter. If there's a lineup, there's a lineup. And I want to show that. But so what we're doing now is we're going, and actually I'm going to, just in case this isn't right, I'm going to start walking you through this. Here's our first index match, okay? So this is going to say if M3 equals blank, then blank. Otherwise, let's go ahead and get something. And what we're going to get is we're going to index. Index says, where do I look? Well, you want to go back to main, and we're going to pull in ownership. So where do I look? We look at main, and what column is ownership? It's here, okay? Yours very well might be here if you do this after FC populates ownership because it's going to put it somewhere in here. But wherever it is, you find it, and it's going to be AK to AK. If you just click at the top here, it's going to populate the whole column. It's going to say, look in the entire column. So look in this column. And then comma, row number. The row number, we don't know. We want to find the row number. That's what we're trying to do, is find the value that matches who we have in M3, which is our first player. So we're going to say, instead of putting in a row number, we're going to use a formula. Match, this is where the match part of index match M3. Now note, since there is no tab reference here, right? You see this, the single quotations and the exclamation point referencing MLB main. Because I'm not using that, even though I'm looking at MLB main, because this formula lives on the sorter page, this M3 is on the sorter page, okay? Don't make this mistake in thinking that this M3 is this M3. It's not the M3 over here. It's the one on here, because you would see a reference to MLB main if it was this M3, because this formula lives here. The problem is Excel's a little stupid. When you go back to the sorter, right, like let's say I didn't type that and I went back to the sorter to now it adds the reference to sorter, which will actually screw this formula up because this formula lives on the sorter. We don't want to reference this. So it gets kind of confusing, but it is M3 that we're referencing, not the M3 on the other page. So anyway, we're going to match the name in M3, and now we're going to go back to our main. So look in this ownership column and find the value that matches whatever name is in M3. And where do you want to look for it in the lookup array? In the A column. Find it, find whatever it is, and then scroll over and find the value in that AK column. Whenever we match, we always match 0, which is an exact match. Excel cannot do either of these other two well. I don't know why it did it there. And then we want to close our parentheses until one turns black and say OK. And we get nothing, not there. Okay? And we're going to figure out why in a minute. But we got to make sure that everything is hunky-dory with our formula. So the formula looks good. There is no ownership there. So is Joe Musgrove on our MLB main? Nope. And that's the problem. But so we did. Oh, you know why? That's why. Because I used a crunch from a different. I used a player list from my existing model, which is from a different slate, just to get ownership. So it looks like it's probably better off that we go ahead and grab. This won't affect you because you're going to be using the same player list to do your crunch. I'm going to copy this player list back in here, and lo and behold, it finds Joe Musgrove just fine. Oh, ownership is there. Perfect. I don't know why that wasn't there before. All right, so we're good. So now it finds Joe Musgrove's ownership. And then don't forget, we want to just grab our columns, put them here. Only this time, we can even copy that one here, but only this time, it's ownership. It's not strip names. I also like to make everything in these two top rows bold, so we should do that now. Now, also, we should assign a different color to this so we don't get confused. You can use it yellow, I guess is good. Right, so now we have ownership. And we got to make sure we come back in here. Now, what's going to happen if I copy this across? Some of these dynamic references are going to change. Is it okay if the M changes? Sure, because it doesn't matter if it goes on to NOP, because if there are no names here, there are no names here. But if the AK changes, we're not going to be looking at ownership anymore. And if the AA changes, we're not going to be looking for the player list anymore. So we want to come in here and we want to make sure we lock these references down. Now, this reference, the matching one, we need that one to be dynamic because we want to not match Musgrove this time. We want Woodruff, and then we want, Christian Betancourt, right? So let's go ahead now and copy this across, and we can send it down. Next thing is we're going to bring in another group of data. In this case, I'm going to make it green and call it projections. Now, since we already have our formula pretty much done, this will pull projections out of AK. All we have to do is take a peek over here. I'm sorry, I meant ownership out of AK. All we have to do is take a peek over here and see where our projections are. So again, here you decide, do you want to take your updated or perhaps changed projection, or do you want to take your raw projection? For now, let's just take AF. So instead of AK, we just need AF, so we can go back to our sorter. One thing to note, when you are copying a formula, if you click a cell and click Control C to copy, that is going to copy the cell, in which case the formula becomes dynamic, and if you paste it over here, everything that changes will change. But if you go up here and copy and highlight this and Control C, that'll copy this formula like it's text, which is what we're doing in this case. Just make sure that after you do that, you don't click over here because it will start to change the formula. You either have to hit Enter or Escape to get back out, okay? Come in here, Control V, puts that formula in here. Now, if I just hit Enter, it's going to give me the exact same result, right? Because it's the exact same formula. But we want to change it to AF for projections. So we just go in here and we adjust this. And now we've got projections. And now we're pulling out our projections. Okay. Now, at this point is where I'll remind you, you can feel free to bring literally anything that you want to bring in here. You can bring anything that's on this sheet, average, whip, ERA, team runs, literally anything you want to bring in. Okay. Salary, if you want to know your salary for your lineup. Anything you want to bring in here, you can certainly bring in here. You can also start adding pages, right? Add another tab here, copy some more data in, bring something else, maybe top stacks, okay? So let's say that you wanted to, bring in the top stacks tool. I can't show you that per se because, again, since we're doing this before the slate, we have all these mismatches. The top stack tool is going to be for whatever slate, for Thursday's slate. My data in here is for some random slate from 2022. The names aren't going to match, but let's just say you had a top stacks tool in here, and let's just say we added a sheet at the end, okay, and we call this top stacks. We could make this yellow because we're going to copy into it. We could even, copy and paste this into here. And let's say that for top stacks, I'm going to make a quick top stacks, okay? I know that went away, whatever. So, and actually I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't do that. Let's do this, ready? So let's just do this. So a top stacks tool might look like this: team and then top stack percentage, okay? And let's say it's 25%, it's 18, it's 15, it's 12, that's 12, 10, 8, 5, something like that, right? So now you get this top stack data. If you wanted to bring in top stacks, we can do this as well. Only I'm doing this for a reason because it's going to show you something important. So let's bring in top stacks data and let's make it a different color. And we're going to call this top stacks. And now you're going to need to reference a different sheet. So you can't use this formula over again. But the other thing you're going to notice here is the name, Joe Musgrove. Whoops, no Joe Musgrove. And obviously we don't want Joe Musgrove anyway because it's a pitcher, but what's going on? Well, top stacks are by team. So now, why don't we insert, copy, change the color, and call it team. And in this case, we will reuse this formula. And we're going to bring in the team for these players. Team, Milwaukee, San Diego, right? N. Go back to our sorter. And N. N. Now we've got our teams. So now what we can do is we could reference San Diego we can go equals if M3 equals blank, then blank. Otherwise, index. Where are we going to look? Here. Again, it's not where we're matching. It's what data are we looking for? What are we trying to pull out? Top stacks. Match what? Not M3. Not M3. AQ3 is going to be the team for the player in M3. So here, and remember, we don't want it to say sorter, so AQ3. Match where? To top stacks AA. Match it how? Exact always. Close it up. And now we've got a top stack percentage. And we can pull that into our data. Now, guess what I forgot to do? Lock. Okay. Now, if you are a keen, well, you know what? I don't have every team, so you're going to get a lot of errors, right? Because I didn't make a complete top stacks tool, but you're starting to get the gist. But if you are a keen observer, you will notice that we are counting Joe Musgrove in our top stacks, who is a pitcher. And we don't want to do that. So there are a couple ways you can do this. The first way is, you'll see in the next video, I am going to make a batters only section here that leaves pitchers behind for all other offensive data. If you choose not to do that, then you can simply go in here and just say if BA2, the heading, equals P, then blank. Otherwise, do this. Okay? And you want BA to be dynamic because you want to look in the heading for each column, but you want the 2 to be anchored because you don't want to look in each row. Okay? So now it will only populate the top stacks for our batters. Okay? That's one way of doing it. To make a batters only section and to like reference everything off of that is the other. Okay? But this is another very effective, perfectly fine way to do that. So now we brought in top stacks. You would continue to do this until, whatever, however many you want to. Like I said, I think I have 400 columns or something here. Bring in as much data as you want to, but eventually you're going to want to get to this section here where you're going to do some totaling, okay? And we're going to do that quickly here because this video is starting to run long and I need to get you guys out of here. So let's go ahead and do that, all right? So now total section. For the total section, we're going to use whatever metrics we are going to sort by, right? So in this case, let's just do ownership and projection, okay? Because this is incomplete, I don't want to screw anything up, but if you wanted to use average or ISO or top stacks percentage or whatever you want to put in here, you can. But we're just going to use these two for now. And this is going to be the totals, okay? So we're going to merge this and call this totals. And equals, if M3 equals blank, then blank, otherwise sum, okay? Now, you could do product, sum, however you want to do it, okay? We'll do product. This is a debate for another day, whether or not sum or product is correct to do for ownership since it's percentages, but you do want to add them all up. Now, you can also decide, do you want to look at ownership just of your main batters? Do you want to include your pitchers? Do you want to do your pitchers separately and weight them differently? Totally up to you. Just know that this is not going to be, like if you do just pitchers, you don't want to start here because on Fanduel, this is also a batter. You want to make sure you take into account whether or not these are batters, not just on Draftkings, but on Fanduel. Okay. But nonetheless, we're gonna do this quickly for everybody. The product of everybody, which is just going to be, what is your problem? Is it product? Oh, it's product. Huh. It's not prod. All right, so you can do product. There's a debate about whether or not ownership sum of product is accurate because you don't add percentages, you multiply them. But the problem with that argument also is that you don't multiply percentages of unlike bases, which is what these are. You're saying that this player is percent owned out of, and this player is a percent owned, but this is not out of a 100% ownership pool. It is like a kind of a revolving pool of ownership here. So it's not correct to multiply them or to add them, to be honest with you, mathematically. And they are basically just attributes. Although they are mathematical in nature, they are attributes of your lineup. It is like, this could be grade A, B, C, D, E, and you could calculate a GPA for this lineup, and it doesn't matter how you calculate it. So is sum wrong? No. Is product wrong? No. They both have their merits. A lot of people do like to use product because it's technically what would be correct if we were using this in a mathematical sense. Either way, it's totally fine. However you want to do it, you can do sum product. And then here, we would use the same, only I do not recommend you ever multiply your projections because that's weird. And then obviously you want to change the range to be AG to AP. And now you get your lineups total projection, and we'll send that down. Now, if we're going to sort based on these metrics, we are going to want to do some sort of an evaluation on these two, because if you use the raw data and start coming up with a lineup score, it's going to be really wonky because lineups that have, if this is your highest and this is your second highest, but there's a huge disparity here, it's going to get unjust proportion here. You don't want to do that. So you have a couple options. You can rank. So equals if M3 equals blank, then, oh my God, if I could type, hello, blank. You can do a rank of BL3 amongst BL3 to BL 2002. And then you want to lock these in because you want to rank everything among the whole thing. And then you have to choose how you rank it. Are you, I did rank D. I don't even know what that is. And then the comma here is going to say, how do you want to order it? Ascending or descending? This confuses everybody. I try not to explain it because it confuses people more. Just simply choose 0 or 1 and then see where it gets you and adjust from there, okay? Because you're going to use these differently in a lot of different ways, okay? Just take my word for that. And you could say, okay, so this is rank number 1 and this is rank number 2. So is it the case that this is, and so now you have to ask yourself the question, how do you want these ranks to go? If I'm building a lineup score out of rank, I would absolutely want this to be the highest projection. You know what? I'm sorry. We should be doing ownership first. So let's go ahead and change this. BK. But anyway, I would want the number of the rank to be higher if my metric here is better for my lineup. So if you believe that lower ownership is better, then I would want the lowest ownership to be the higher number, so that at the end, when we have a higher score for this lineup, it's because it had lower ownership, okay? So to verify that that is the case, and I'll be honest with you, sometimes these product numbers confuse the hell out of me. So just as a quick reference so that I'm super clear on what's going on, I'm going to put in the sum of ownership here. Okay. And I actually like to multiply this by 100 because I'm used to seeing it like this, 201. So now, clearly you see that this lower ownership lineup has a higher number than this. So we know that 0 is what we want here, right? And then if you go down here, these much lower ownerships have the higher number. So this is good, right? So in terms of ownership rank, that's good. Now with projection rank though, we are going to want to use a very similar formula, but first of all, we want this to be BL. But second of all, we also want it to be ranked so that the higher the number, the higher the projection. So we want 106.7 to be higher than this. And so you want to change that around to 1. Okay? Make sense? Now, as an alternative, another way you can do this, right? Just because I want to show it to you. Another way you can do this is you can do the max. Let's just do this example with projection because it's easier to understand. Okay? You can look at the maximum value that's in this list. Okay? Which happens to be the top one. Maximum value. And then you can take, again, this is not in addition to this. This is if you wanted to do this separately. This would be P percentile. Okay? Now here you can say equals if M3 equals blank, then blank. And you can just say BM3 divided by BM1. Be sure to lock that BM1 in because you don't want it to ever change. And this is saying, how does this compare to the maximum? And in this case, it's going to be 100% of it because it is the maximum. And then as you send this down, you'll see they'll fall into different percentiles. Okay, this is in the 99.7 percentile, 99.7.62 percentile, and so on. And this will rank. You could use this as a rank as well. Okay, because it is showing you how each lineup, what percentile of that maximum it is. It's another way of ranking it. Just know that if you do this with, if you were to do this with your ownership, you would either need to use your minimum here, but probably the easier way to keep everything straight is to use the maximum and then just multiply this by -1 so that it's giving you a negative instead of a positive, okay? But nonetheless, choose your method, however you want to do it, okay? So we can do totals, we can do ranks, and now we're going to need score, okay? Why did that get reference wrong? Isn't that weird? Oh, because I deleted the column? That's, Excel sucks sometimes. And this is BL3 to BL3 and BL 2002. We got to lock these in, and that should bring it back. Although, yeah, this is only 45. Yep, perfect. So, score equals if M3 equals blank, then blank. What are we doing? We're going to do BM3 plus BN3. And that's my score. Okay? So there's my lineup score, and wonderful. But what if you wanted to rank, what if you wanted to weight these differently? What if projection was more important? You could come up here and take this out. You don't need this. And we could put some weights up here. So let's say we wanted to weight ownership 45 and 55 for rank. So then, instead of this, you would parenthesize each one of these, and it would be BM3 times BM1. And you are going to want to lock that in, okay? Plus BN3 times BN1. Lock that in. And now that changes things a little bit. And then if you want to come in here and say either, hey, on this slate or in general, I think that is the proper weight. Now you can see everything changes, okay? And then another little thing you can do here is you can just sum these two so that, you can keep track of whether or not it's 100%. right? Um, so there we go. Now let's go ahead and give our lives some color. And by color, I mean lack of color, I guess, but whatever, just something to go by here. And then, I mean, you can do this however you want, right? For some weird reason, I always gravitate towards this. I like this color. It's kind of like, hello. So that's my sort. Now, the very last thing here that we need to do is, and then I am working a little bit backwards by showing you, but so go ahead and scroll all the way across here and then Control Shift L. That will give you these sorter tabs here, the filtering ones. So now we can sort. But what you'll notice here is we can't sort large to small. Whenever you see this error or this situation condition in Excel, it's because you have blanks or you have something that doesn't sort. So what we need to do for this column in particular is instead of if it's blank then blank, if it's blank then zero, okay? Add something there that's at least a filler. And now you see that these two come back into play. And if you sort this by largest, you'll notice that it goes to your largest score, but also it sorts your lineup. Everything moves, okay? If you undo this, you'll see that this is your current lineup right here. You've got this Woodruff, Bethencourt, Freeman, Mookie Betts, Trace Thompson, Aaron Judge. You get all these guys in there. And then when you sort this to the max, you come back here and you'll notice that it gets Sam Haggerty here instead. And, Peraza, Nick Gordon's in here, Langellier's in there, Woodruff. So you can see that it sorts your whole lineup. And that, I believe, is going to be it for today. I will try to, in the next video, work in, should I do exposures really quickly? No, I'll do the exposures in the next video. All right.